Hi, this is Jack Daulton again. I'm in the hospital one more time with my fiancee, Roz Ho. This is the sixth video we've taken on my brain surgery odyssey. This is no longer part of the brain surgery trilogy. We're starting a new chapter, I think, here now. We'll just call this the brain surgery part 2. The situation is this. There has been a downturn in my condition, a significant downturn in my condition, which began some time ago, sort of silently, undetected. And Saturday afternoon, which was 48 hours ago, this silent development revealed itself in quite dramatic fashion. I awoke on Saturday after feeling rather bad on Friday, feeling malaise, lethargy, headache all day Friday. Awoke on Saturday, took a shower, and as I was washing my hair, I felt an area of sensitivity on the back of my head, an area of tenderness in the area of the back incision from my previous craniotomy, my previous brain surgery. And there's also a swollen area of swelling there. And I asked Roz to take a look at it, and she said it looked rather inflamed, rather pink, didn't I?
Yes, and I believe I said at the time when I looked at it, I said, I think we should go to the emergency room, because it kind of looks like you might have an infection.
And so that day was Saturday.
That was Saturday, May 7th.
May 7th, 2011. Almost
2 months after your initial surgery. On
March 14th to do a craniotomy and for the purpose of removing my brain tumor, my meningioma. In any case, we went to the emergency room, and they quickly determined that something serious was going on. I had thought that this was just some kind of skin irritation that would be treated with a salve.
In fact, you almost, when we got to the emergency room, you almost said, oh, maybe this isn't really an emergency and we shouldn't be here. But
yeah, I was like, oh, this is kind of embarrassing because this doesn't justify an emergency room visit. But in fact, it turned out to be something quite serious. The area of tenderness, the swelling on my scalp was just the outside manifestation of something very serious and sinister that was going on inside my head, in fact, beneath my skull. An infection of the brain that was that had apparently begun or was introduced during my initial surgery on March 14th. Apparently during that surgery, some bacteria was introduced into the surgical area, and that bacteria was rather indolent or slow growing, and so it did not manifest itself for over 2 months.
Well, there were subtle symptoms, but
very subtle. Usually when you have a surgical infection, the symptoms are gross or obvious. You feel terrible, especially an infection of the brain.
Well, you didn't have a high white blood cell count. You weren't running a temperature. You were doing otherwise just fine. And in fact, when they did the MRI a few weeks previous, there was, not any obvious signs of it.
Yeah, the only symptoms I had were ones that would be associated not with an infection, but with inflammation secondary to the surgical irritation of the brain. And what I'm talking about there were the motor losses, the motor deficits I had recurrently experienced on the right side of my body, and in fact I'm still experiencing those. No one thought that those were related to an infection, although they can be, and in fact now we think they were. Apparently this infection grew very slowly and kind of came to a critical stage over the weekend when I began to observe symptoms actually outside of the skull, on the top of my head in the area of the incision, and began to experience some symptoms like malaise and headaches and just feeling bad that one would associate with a generalized infection in any area of your body. Unfortunately, when you have an infection, a post brain surgery infection of the brain, the solution, the treatment, is radical. They have to reopen your cranium. That is to say, they have to reopen the incision in your scalp, remove the area of the skull, they call it a skull flap, remove that, and then physically clean out the infected area by irrigating it with fluid, introducing broad spectrum antibiotics. When they're done with this irrigation and cleaning out of the infected area of your brain and the areas adjacent to your brain, they do not replace the skull flap, the area of the skull that they have removed, because that piece of skull does not have a blood supply, and if it has been infected, there's no way to eliminate the infection from that piece of skull. The way infections are treated is through antibiotics transmitted to the affected area via blood supply, and that part of the skull that has been removed previously has no blood supply, and so there's no way to completely eliminate bacteria from it. So instead they just discard it and will replace it later with what they call a prosthetic skull, an artificial skull.
Once they are sure that your infection is gone, which could take several months, maybe even a year.
Yeah, in my case, that piece of skull is about 2 inches by 2 inches. And so after having irrigated, cleaned out the infected area, administered broad spectrum antibiotics to the area underneath the skull and to actually underneath the adjacent membrane, even irrigating somewhat the brain itself in the adjacent area, they then sewed back up the scalp flap without replacing the skull.
So basically right now you have a very soft spot on your head.
Like a baby,
Yeah.
you know, an area where there is not an area of the head where there is no skull. And so that is a very vulnerable area of, obviously. It's just a piece of scalp, a piece of artificial membrane, and then the brain, but no skull. And as I said, that's about a 2 inch by 2 inch area on the very top of my head, slightly to the left.
Yeah, in fact, they've outfitted you with a helmet.
Yeah, that's the helmet I will be wearing for perhaps as long as the next year. The course of
To protect his head.
We've been investigating other possible helmets though, that are more stylish, like an equestrian helmet or a pith helmet for a safari. And we'll continue to investigate other possibilities.
Hey, I think you should just have a variety of them for each occasion.
Why not? Why
Yeah,
not?
why not?
You know, maybe when I go to that art exhibit, that art opening in a couple of months,
Pith helmet,
the pith helmet
I
would be
think might
appropriate.
do very well.
In any case,
So-
in any case,
Well, opinions actually vary on this matter because your surgeon actually don't think you need to wear a helmet, although, you know, it seems very fragile to walk around without protection for your head.
yeah, I mean, it is not small, 2 inches square, that opening, but in some cases they can be much larger. Some people have areas of the skull missing that are, you know, 4 inches by 4 inches, and obviously those people are much more at risk. But there is a risk. It's at the top of my head, an area that has no skull.
I mean, a book could fall on it.
And, you know,
Anything.
something from a tree, you know, and so you have to be
A
very
squirrel throwing something.
You have to be very careful. The brain is at risk there. Now, returning to my condition, a post-surgical infection of the brain is an extremely serious condition that can be life-threatening. short of paralysis or death, it's probably the most serious complication of brain surgery. And so it has to be taken extraordinarily seriously. I will have it's a rare occurrence, unfortunately and unfortunately. Unfortunately for me, because I have this condition now. My neurosurgeon said he's done over 1,000 craniotomies and has only experienced 2 or 3 incidences of post-surgical infection of the brain. In any case, the course of treatment is very aggressive and very long term. I will be administered a course of antibiotics, broad spectrum, and also hopefully more focused as they identify the specific bacteria that's causing the infection over the next 6 weeks to maybe 6 months or more. The reason they administer the antibiotics for such a long period of time, they want to be absolutely sure that all of the bacteria is gone before they conclude the treatment. Because if it isn't gone, it will simply come back, recur. And more specifically, before they install the prosthetic skull piece, where the skull is currently missing, they want to be absolutely sure that the infection has been eradicated. And in order to be sure of that, the course of treatment with antibiotics has to be long term. So it could be as long as a year from now before they install the prosthetic skull piece. And so it looks like a year from now I will be having yet a third brain surgery. Possibly sooner, but it could be as long as a year from now. Another brain surgery. That one to install the skull prosthetic piece, which is intended to protect your brain, of course, but also for cosmetic purposes. Because unfortunately, I've got a bit of a flat top now. I don't know if you can see that where my skull is missing, and that will even subside over the next couple weeks. So I'll have a subsidence on my head, and it's kind of unsightly, I think. And so there are cosmetic reasons for it as well.
Well, I'm not really so worried about the cosmetic. I'm more worried about the fact that you have a hole in your head.
Yeah, and of course, the main concern and issue is the infection. The infection is extremely serious. An infection of your brain, a bacterial infection of your brain. I mean, that's just common sense that is a serious condition. Can be life-threatening if it's not controlled. And I'm just hopeful that the antibiotic regimen that they are pursuing is effective. And I should say that my doctors are very hopeful that it will be effective, that the infection can be controlled and eliminated, and that I will still make a full recovery. Unfortunately, my recovery now is going to take much longer than we had originally anticipated. We had originally anticipated that I would be fully recovered from my initial brain surgery in 2 to 4 months.
Yeah, I think we're making some modifications to our lifestyle for the next, 6 months to a year. I think we're probably going to stay much closer to home, especially while you're going through the antibiotic treatment. Oh yeah,
we should say that they installed today something called a PICC line in my arm, which is a sort of a home IV setup, a setup that allows you to administer intravenously antibiotics into a vein in your upper arm through a catheter that extends into the vena cava, which is one of the major veins of your body behind your heart. So a catheter extends from this all up the arm, around the shoulder, all the way to behind the heart. And this is to very efficiently administer antibiotics at least a couple times a day while you're at home. Otherwise, I would have to stay at the hospital for the entire antibiotic course, which would be
6 weeks
or more.
Yeah. So it took them 4 tries to install the line today. So that did not add to your comfort today. I'm sorry.
The installation of the PICC lines, a catheter that goes up your arm and behind your heart, obviously is a serious procedure in itself. And the first 3 attempts which were in my right arm, were unsuccessful. And the fourth one, fortunately, the fourth attempt was successful. But that was quite an ordeal today as well. The other ordeal today was the removal of a drain from my skull.
Oh, you were in pain. I couldn't watch. I had to leave the room. It was so bad.
A tube emanated from my skull to a bottle, a plastic bottle, where they were collecting fluid from the area of my surgery. And today my neurosurgeon, literally pulled that tube out. And it was one of the most painful things I've ever experienced.
It was quite bad.
Oh, but I survived, and I'm sure I'm going to have other uncomfortable experiences over the next year, but it's looking good. Today I'm feeling much better than I did yesterday, and that's encouraging. And this is quite a setback, but I don't think we're daunted by it, and we're going to get through it. And
well, you were quite daunted, yes.
I have had periods of depression after
Saturday when we quickly went from, oh, let's get this small skin infection looked at, to, okay, you're having major brain surgery again.
Yeah, from going to
immediately.
Yeah.
You're not going home.
From going to the emergency room thinking I was going to have a salve, an antiseptic salve applied to my wound, to having brain surgery to remove permanently a part of my skull. That was a psychologically depressing moment, and I have had some downtime since then, but now I feel much better because today was a good day, and I can already see improvement by reason of the antibiotics they're giving me, and so I'm hopeful that it's all going to resolve. It's just going to take more time. Anyway, this is another update to this brain surgery saga. It continues to be a non-linear path with many ups and downs, but it's still looking positive, I think. And we'll get through this, and I'll be back to my old form in no time. Well, maybe a year. Okay, Roz.
Which will seem like no time, because we're going to make it fun.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank my good friend and world traveler Michael Kim for being the cinematographer on this video. Thank you, Michael.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.